Welcome to the Sports Spectrum Podcast, where faith and sports collide. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This is episode number 24 of the Sports Spectrum Podcast. My name is Jason Romano. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of our program today. You can subscribe and download this podcast everywhere podcasts are found, on Google Play and iTunes and Stitcher. As always, you can go to sportsspectrum.com and see all of our wonderful content there, including daily devotionals, updated articles every single day, and we do put a post out for each podcast that comes out. Every single podcast that we put out is on sportsspectrum.com with our favorite quotes, like a show notes section that gives you an idea of what we talk about, some nice little pieces of content as far as pictures and YouTube clips, all that kind of encompassed into one post for each podcast. So check that out at sportsspectrum.com. As always, too, leave a review. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know how we're doing on the podcast. So leave a review on iTunes. Let us know how everything is going with you, whether you like the podcast, if you have an idea for a guest, what you like, what you don't like. We'd love to hear from you. So leave a review, please, for us on iTunes. All right, our guest today, Ethan Chapman. You may recognize that name. Now, Ethan has been a minor league baseball player now this past season in the Mexican League for the Vaqueros Union Laguna. And he is also a Sports Spectrum contributor. So if you read sportsspectrum.com on a daily basis or so, you will see Ethan Chapman and his contribution each week. He does what we call a diary of a minor leaguer. And Ethan has this sort of journal entry that he puts in there every single week with kind of an update on things that are kind of going on in his life, on the field, off the field, what it's like to be a baseball player in the minor leagues. It is not a glamorous life at all. Now, Ethan is 27 years old and is still achieving and trying to pursue his dream of making it to the major leagues. And I think for a lot of us as sports fans, you know, we kind of assume that this life of professional sports is glamorous and wonderful and awesome. And there are many aspects of it that are. You get to play sports for a living. That's pretty cool. But as Ethan is about to tell you on this podcast, it is a grind. It's a struggle. It's not easy. And Ethan is going to share with us really some sort of a peek behind the curtain, if you will, of what that life is like as a minor league baseball player. He's a married man to Kylie. They have no kids yet, and they're sort of on this journey together. And it's a unique look, I think, at life of a minor league baseball player and sort of that grind and trying to sort of stay on track to potentially make it and achieve that dream of playing in Major League Baseball that not many people get to achieve. It's very difficult, and Ethan's still on that course and doing his best. So I think you guys will really like this interview. Ethan was selected by the Kansas City Royals in the 2012 MLB Amateur Draft. He's got as high as AAA. He's reached there, but he has not made it to the major leagues, as I referenced earlier. And he's been in the minor leagues since, and he's been kind of traveling all over the place. I mean, not only in the United States, but obviously taking his talents down to Mexico. So without further ado, I'm excited for you guys to hear the journey and the story of minor league baseball player Ethan Chapman. Ethan Chapman, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here on the podcast. And before we kind of learn more about your journey and who you are and kind of the beginnings of your life, tell me about your season in Mexico, first time playing there. What has that adjustment been like for you playing minor league baseball in the Mexican League?
It's been a little different. You know, it's definitely a culture shock. And this is actually the first time that I've had my wife with me, too. So that actually takes a little bit more pressure off. And we brought down my dog as well. So it's good to have familiar faces around and someone to come home to. But, you know, baseball has always been baseball. You know, you hit the ball, you catch the ball, and you run the bases, you know. So baseball is very similar. There's a couple different tweaks and all that. But, you know, it's good to be in the clubhouse with the guys and learn from the culture.
Describe what you mean by culture shock.
You know, even just being able to go out and get something to eat, you know, it's hard because I'm not fluent in Spanish. You know, I have a little bit of heritage, which is why that I'm able to play down here. But, you know, my parents never spoke Spanish. So learning to do the small things like going out to get something to eat or trying to go to the grocery store or whatever, like those are things that you have to learn on the fly. And, you know, I feel like we've done pretty well so far. So I want to be able to expand my Spanish vocabulary as much as I can because it's so valuable.
What's been the biggest difference playing minor league baseball in Mexico compared to here in the U.S.?
I think the biggest adjustment for me was that we opened up our season in Tijuana, and Tijuana is one of the bigger teams out here, and there's probably 15, 16,000 people there, and the just constant pounding of music is different. They play music after each pitch up until the pitcher throws the next pitch. Like while he's in the lineup, music is still playing. So having all the noise and all that, it took a while for me to get used to and to be able to lock into the game. So I feel like that's one of the biggest differences.
Is it harder to hit a ball in complete silence or with music blaring in the background? I'm curious.
Right now, I guess it's become the same for me. But at first, it took a while to get used to with all the music and going because you just can't focus on your task. In affiliated ball or in the States, everything is real quiet. It's almost like you're playing golf. Like when the pitch starts, everyone's quiet and, you hit and then they cheer or whatever afterwards. But down here, it's constant, a party really. They really enjoy the game out here and they show it.
Let's go back a little bit. We're talking to Ethan Chapman here from the Vaqueros Union Laguna in the Mexican League, and he's a Diary of a Minor Leaguer journal entry contributor for us at Sports Spectrum. And let's go back, Ethan, to your younger days from a baseball perspective. When did you first pick up a bat and fall in love with the game?
There's actually video of me that my parents had that I was in a diaper still, and my dad was setting up a tee for me in the living room, and I was hitting balls. So I was probably about 1.5, 2 years old, and I'm starting to swing and pick up a bat left-handed, and I guess that's where it started.
What are your memories throughout like your youth and playing Little League baseball and things like that? Just of being a baseball player and kind of just being a kid and kind of combining those two things. Like, was it part of your culture, your lexicon on a daily basis as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up playing, but I also played other sports. I played football and basketball growing up too. I did the whole, I rode bikes, I skateboarded, I bladed, everything. Like I was just more an outside kid and was very active. So I feel like all that stuff kind of helped me in my career, kept me well rounded, and allowed my abilities to come through. But like it was the biggest thing for me was I wasn't always the best kid growing up. I always had guys that were better than me, and I always played up in age groups. So guys were always bigger and stronger, and like I didn't really start developing until probably in between my sophomore and junior year of high school. That's when I started getting bigger and stronger and started developing a little bit more power and speed. But there's always guys that were better than me growing up, and for me to make it, it's humbling to know that those guys had just as much ability or even more than I did.
We'll talk about your collegiate career and going to Cal State San Bernadino in just a sec, but I want to ask you about your faith journey also as a kid and when, how that faith was integrated into your life. When did you first make Jesus Christ Lord of your life?
Well, I went to a Christian school starting from kindergarten, and I graduated through that same school. So kindergarten through 12th grade graduation, and I never was too strong into my faith probably until my senior year of high school. So we had chapel, we had Bible classes, and I through for 13 years. And for some reason, like nothing really resonated with me. And it wasn't like I was a bad kid or anything, but I just didn't have that jump of faith into my beliefs. And we actually have this retreat in high school that we go up into the mountains and we get to know all the new kids for the high school. And we have a pastor that comes and talks to us, and it's just a good way to get away and learn about your classmates. But for some reason, my senior year, I was able to break down a little bit and accept Jesus as my savior. And it was afterward, a kid came up to me and said that he actually prayed specifically for me that I would accept this message, and if apparently it worked out, and ever since then it's been a good journey, a strong journey, and a developing one.
What's your biggest struggle, or what's been your biggest struggle, over the years since you made Christ the Lord of your life in balancing being, I shouldn't say balancing, but I guess it is being a believer in Christ, but also being a baseball player, a professional baseball player?
Well, I think it goes beyond being just a baseball player for me. I think it's more of being, I guess, a man. But for me, it's a lot about letting go and not being in control of everything. Because I feel like that's one of my things that whenever there's a problem, like I feel like there needs to be an answer or a solution or whatever, and I feel like I need to be in control. And especially with baseball, like there's so many ups and downs, and not a lot of it is in my control. That's one of the first things they tell us is control what you can, because there's so little that we can control that we need to focus on those things. So for me to be able to let go and be still. I wrote my last journal entry on being still and listening to God's plan and His voice, and that's one of the biggest struggles for me, is because I just feel like I need to be in control all the time, and it's humbling to realize that I'm not, and I need to be able to sit back and listen and take in what God wants from me.
That's tough as an athlete, though, isn't it? I mean, I played high school basketball and a little bit of college basketball at a community college, and I remember I felt like I was in control of me. I was the one, and I was not a Christian or a believer in Jesus when I was in high school. But that's tough as an athlete to say, okay, I can't control this. I need to relinquish control to a higher power here. That's tough, right? As an athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because you feel like you're the one putting in the hours of work and the determination, and it's your dream. So for something that's you care about so much, you grip it so tight that you end up squeezing the life out of it. So for you to be able to let go and let God take care of it and trust that He has the best plan for you, it is tough, but it's definitely worth it. And releasing all that stress and anxiety onto Him is it's actually refreshing and freeing.
You attend college at Cal State San Bernadino, and we're talking to Ethan Chapman here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. And Cal State San Bernardino, a Division II school, and you proceed to rake, from what I was looking up on your stats. You set the school's single season record with 60 runs as a freshman in 2010. You tied the single season mark with 14 homers. You earned second team All West Region honors. And then your final year there, you earned ABCA West Region Golden Glove for the award there. Tell me about your time playing college baseball at Cal State San Bernardino. What was that time like for you?
It was great. I still most of the people that were in my wedding party were from college and from my baseball team. So the relationships that I've built at that stadium or at that school, it really carried on. And the baseball program is great. I think the 3 years that I was there, we probably had 12 guys drafted. So the talent level is really good there, especially being from a D2. Most people think, you got to go to a D1 to play professionally. But our conference is really competitive. We have a couple big leaguers from my school and from our conference that are currently playing in the big leagues, and it was a good time for me, and it's close to my family, so everyone was able to, and my friends, and they were able to come and watch me play often, and I just really enjoyed my time there.
When did you first think, I might be able to get drafted and play professional baseball? When did that moment hit you, or did it not hit you until you were actually drafted?
Probably after my freshman year, like you said, putting up those numbers that I did, I always felt like I played played well enough to get to the next level. But there's always a little bit of doubt in your head. Coming from a small division high school, and then going to a Division II in the NCAA, it's challenging to up your play level, to think that you're worth being there. And then once I started playing and being around those guys, I realized that they're just average guys too, and they just want the same dream. And I was able to put up decent numbers, and that's when scouts started reaching out to me and telling me that this is possible. So it's always a kid's dream to receive a info card from a scout with a major league team's logo on it. That's always been a passion of mine. I actually kept all the letters and business cards that I got from those scouts too, just to show my kids one day.
What is that process like, being scouted? Like, what is the conversation that you're having with these scouts? And, you said you have a bunch of these sort of token memorabilia type pieces from those times. What was that like?
Initially, they don't say anything to me. I don't know if it was my coaches or whoever, but my manager would actually hand me their business cards. So I never really had too much interaction personally with the scouts until probably my junior year when I was draft eligible. And I don't know if that's a rule or whatever it is, but they kind of kept their distance. You'd always see them in the crowd, during games or during some practices, just keep an eye on guys. And like I said, we had guys that got drafted a while, so you never really were sure if they were checking you out or your teammate. But, it's always good to have scouts in the stands. You might have a good game, and all of a sudden you're on someone's radar.
Let's go to that MLB Amateur Draft. It's June of 2012, and you've written about this in the journal entry on sportspectrum.com, but I'd like you to tell that story to our listeners on the podcast of that moment of waiting and being patient and then getting drafted. What was that moment like? Let's go back to that 2012 MLB Amateur Draft.
It's stressful. Like, obviously it's an exciting time, but most guys that tell their draft stories, unless you're number one overall pick, everyone's told a different slot that they're supposed to go in or a different round. And I had a wide range of rounds that I should have been taken in or thought I would be taken in, and no one actually knows for sure. So anyone that's getting up for the draft, it's hard to predict. So the night before I got drafted, it was my sister-in-law's graduation from high school, and I thought I would go that night, and then I had to go and put a smile on my face for her, and be happy for her when I was kind of dying inside, thinking that I should have been drafted by then. But the latest I was told I was supposed to go was the 25th round, and then the next day, the 25th round passed, and I still hadn't been drafted. So I was sitting in my living room with my mom and my dad. My mom had the laptop up, and she was watching each pick go by, and I was just, I almost gave up. Like, I just threw away my career. I'm not going to get drafted, and the 30th round comes up, and my phone rings, and my name pops up on the computer at the same time, and my mom starts screaming. My dad throws his arms in the air, and we share a big crying hug in the kitchen.
How difficult was that for you? And you said you wrote this in the devotional on sportspectrum.com, but how difficult was this for you to literally be patient and know that this, like many things in life, but this truly was completely out of your hands? How difficult was that?
Very. You can't do anything while you're in there. You can text or call the scout and see what's going on, but you literally have no control. So, and at that time, I wasn't exactly working on my being patient skills, so I had to struggle through it. And even having my family there, feeling bad for me or whatever, it's tough. But all that excitement, it was all worth it afterwards.
So then you leave sunny California, you're drafted by the Royals, and you're reporting to Idaho. Now, I've never been to Idaho, but I got to imagine, much like Mexico, it's probably a little bit of a culture shock going from California to Idaho. But your first minor league stop there, and you have a great first season of professional ball. You hit .313. You got 25 stolen bases in 68 games. Age 22, and you're leaving California and headed toward this completely different world in Idaho. Take us back to that. What was that like?
I've always been a homebody, so this was actually my first time leaving home and being away from my family. And yeah, I grew up in the same family house for 22 years, so it was my first time actually like leaving and leaving behind my family and friends. So it was good to start off on a good season, and everything seems to go smoother when you're playing well. So making those friends and being a part of the Royals organization, which is now one of the top organizations that people talk about when they talk about the front office and the vibes that they give, and they really pour a bunch of effort and money into taking care of their players, and it shows.
All right, well, let's go back for a minute now, because I remember when I was 18 and I left high school, and I was 18, not 22, but I lived with my parents the whole time and all that, my family, my mom and my stepdad. Then I go away to college, and it is like night and day. I have no idea how to do my own laundry. I have no idea how to make my own food. I'm eating terribly. I mean, what was that like for you? You go from living at home for 22 years in the same house and suddenly you're in Idaho on your own.
Yeah, well, a thing that made it easier was because most of the guys were going through the same thing, so we kind of figured out
Mm.
how to adult together, I guess, and then they put us up in a hotel, and it was an extended stay, so we had a kitchen and laundry and stuff there as well. So I guess you just learn as you go, and it was comforting knowing the other guys were going through the same growing up period at the same time, but not much cooking went on there. It was we had Buffalo Wild Wings right next to the hotel, so before or after the game, that was kind of the stop.
As many professional players who are trying to make it to the major leagues and dreaming about make it to the major leagues, you start to follow what appears to be the course. It's 2013, you play A ball in two levels. 2014, you make it to the Texas League, you play double A ball. And then 2015, you move from the Royals organization, you get released, you're picked up by the Phillies, you make it all the way to Triple A. You're one step from the majors. Let's describe that minor league journey those 3 seasons were like for you, the ups and downs.
Oh man, baseball's just full of those, the ups and downs, the struggles and the triumphs, and bad weeks and good weeks. And through A ball, everyone, you kind of with the same guys through the whole time, the same teammates. And then once you start getting the double A is when you start seeing guys get released, see guys getting traded, and seeing some friends make it to the big leagues. So you have one day you might have one of your best friends released, and then the next day all of a sudden another friend is making his dream come true and is in the big leagues. So it's a time of very highs and very lows, and to see your dream so close to you. And for me, it hasn't happened yet, and I don't know if it will, but it's to be that close. Not many guys can say that they've been that close, and I'm honored to play where I have.
So many people think being a professional baseball player is living this glamorous life. And many people, I would say the majority of people, don't see the grind that minor league baseball truly is, with no guarantees, small towns versus big cities, extended stay hotels, as you described, versus, glamorous places to live. Tell us about that grind that is minor league baseball each day, even in Mexico now for you.
Yeah, well, minor league baseball it's pictured as something that's awesome, and there's parts of it that's great. You get to play baseball, but the pay isn't very good. You have 12, 15-hour bus rides, and these aren't the nice buses. You're sitting next to somebody. You have to sit up straight the whole time, and it's tough. And not being able to see your family or even provide for anything. You're lucky if you can pay for your phone bill. And just constant travel and highs and lows of success, and I've actually playing well or playing bad, having a bad week, and like I mentioned, having friends get released or sent home, and now their dreams crushed, and you just pray that you're not the next one in line. But it's just it's not easy, but it's once you get to the big leagues, it's all makes it worth it. And even if you don't, that experience and the brotherhood that you are now a part of, it makes it all worth it in the end.
Is it tough to focus on the field, playing every day, working on your hitting, working on your fielding, and like you said, knowing that tomorrow could be the day you get a call one way or the other to move up or move down, kind of looking over your shoulder? Is that tough, or do you just kind of have to block that out and just focus on each game? I know it's a cliche, but is that truly what it is?
Yeah, just because each day it's something new. As a position player, you can literally get 4 hits and hit 2 home runs in one game, and all of a sudden the next day you go 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. That's just how baseball is, and that's the monster that we fall in love with. It's full of those ups and downs, and there's been streaks where I felt like I couldn't get out. And I feel like I'm on fire. Singles, doubles, triples, whatever. And then the next week, I literally can't see the baseball, and like it could be mental, it could be physical. So all those, the daily in and out of practice and, trying to be as consistent as possible is the real challenge.
So you're one step away from the major leagues. You make it to AAA, and then 2016 arrives. Tell us what happened from there.
Well, I got to the Phillies in AAA, and I only got 12 plate appearances with them, and I was 3 for 10 with 2 walks, and I ended up getting released. But it was close to the end of the season, and by the end of it, I've been released twice. I've been picked up twice, and it was just really draining on me and my family. So when I got back home after the Phillies had released me, and I finished the season in Bridgeport, Connecticut, in the Atlantic League in Indy Ball, and I finished the season, got home, and it was just so draining on everyone, including myself, and mentally, physically, everything, emotionally. And we really had to really think and pray about what was next in our lives. If I wanted to continue playing, and I just wasn't sure if it was the right route for me. Being released twice, it can really crush you. Most guys just get released once and they call it a career, but for some reason, me and my wife talked about it, prayed about it, and we thought we'd give it one more go, and ended up working out well. I had one of my favorite seasons I had last year in the American Association. Then coming out this year, I had this contract to provide for my wife for the first time by myself, so she can take some time off. She's an emergency room nurse, and she provided so much for us the previous years. And I know that job is so stressful, and for her to enjoy some time off and be able to travel with me and experience this lifestyle together, it's been a real blessing.
You've mentioned your wife many times. If you've read sportspectrum.com and saw Ethan's diary of a minor leaguer contributions, and I think your writing's been really great, and it's been wonderful to kind of follow throughout the season and see how life has been like for you in Mexico. Like you said, for the first time with your wife with you on this journey, and you mentioned your family quite a bit. I want to talk about your mom in a second, but first I want to talk about your wife. You get married in 2013 to Kylie. What's that journey of marriage been like for you as you've tried to balance a baseball career at the same time?
Well, we've been together for a while. I think we're closing in on our 10 years of being together. I've known her for 12 years, so she's always been a part of my baseball journey and supporting me, and knowing that this is the route I wanted to take. So when I found out that she was okay with this lifestyle and possibly being a part, I knew that she was going to be the one for me. But for her to back us financially, not many people would be okay with spending time away from their husband and fitting the bill for it. So it's been amazing to be able to provide for her for a change, and to have her with me and experience all the things that we've had. And she's a trooper. Even the first week out in Mexico, we had a road trip, and we didn't know the culture very much, and she spent a week in Mexico by herself, barely knowing any Spanish. And we were concerned about her being safe or whatever, and not knowing the language. But for her to go through those challenges and just to be willing to be with me is awesome.
How difficult was that for you early in your marriage? So you've been together a long time, but now you're married. So that's different. And you're married, and then you're playing baseball in Idaho, in Bridgeport, and some of these smaller areas, and she's working as an emergency room nurse. Like, how difficult was that on your marriage early on?
It's tough. You do a lot of sitting in the hallway, talking on the phone at the hotel. You know what I mean? Just to keep us both connected to each other. That's the biggest part. Not feeling that you're separated just from distance, but separated emotionally as well. Because that's the biggest thing. Is you can do some time apart, but once you start to fall apart emotionally and not being connected together, then that's when trouble really starts. So it takes sacrifice on both sides. Especially with time differences and time changes. So most of the time I'm 2 or 3 hours ahead of her. So she's getting off work at 10, 11 o'clock at night, and it's 1, 2 in the morning for me. I just finished a game, or I'm traveling on the bus, and we both got to make those sacrifices to make sure our marriage survives.
The other female in your life is your mother. Tell me about your mom.
I mean, she's great. She just passed in November, and she had leukemia, which we didn't know was leukemia until probably 6 months before that. She went to all these different doctors, and she started feeling sick probably around the time I got drafted. And her just constantly not feeling well or being in pain or whatever, it it was just for years, and we just kind of realized it was there, but we never really got a true diagnosis of what it was, and the doctors couldn't really figure it out. And it was just tough to see her start to struggle towards the end. But the way she sacrificed for me and all that she's done, and the impact she left on everybody that she was around is unbelievable. Like there was hundreds of people at her service. There was hundreds of people that donated money while she was going through her cancer treatments, and just the impact she left on people was unbelievable.
How was your faith tested going through a process like this?
I mean, obviously it's tough because that's your mom, and you want to make sure that you take care of her, especially being so young. She was only 60 years old.
Yeah.
And you in the back of your head, you always know that your parents might pass away later, but you always envision them being older and with a complete life. But we always saw her as being so active and joyful. But it looks like she completed all she could in 60 years, and that was enough. And the impact she left is unbelievable, and she forever changed my life, and I'm thankful for her.
Last one on your mom, and I understand how difficult this must be. We're talking to Ethan Chapman here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. What was that process of grief like for you, or what's it been like for you? It's been less than a year still. It was November, you said, of 2016 when she passed on to be with the Lord. What's that process of grief been like for you just in these past few months?
It hasn't been easy, but it's actually easier than I thought it would be, and it's not in a negative way. It's really positive, thinking that she did complete all that she needed to do. She raised us right, and she saw me get married, and everything that she did is complete, and she can rest and not be in pain anymore. And I know that she watches every game and is proud.
That's awesome. So you're finishing up your time in Mexico. We're taping this interview beginning of July. The Mexican League finishes up its season in early August. Just what happens next? What happens when the season's over, Ethan? Are you under contract and you can't go play anywhere else? Do you wait for a call? What happens after the season's over here in a couple weeks in Mexico?
Well, that's actually one of my working on being patient and being still things. There's a bunch of different options that could happen. There's my team has my rights for next year, but there's also things about, if this is it, should we move on? Should we play winter ball? Like there's a couple teams that I'm trying to talk to and affiliated. We'll see if, that works out. But, we're also trying to possibly sell and buy a house, back home. And there's just, and, like I said before, my wife's a ER nurse, but should she go back to work? Does she travel with me if I get a winter ball job or not? Like, there's just so many different options. And for someone that's a control freak like me, like, I don't like having that many options up in the air, and one thing has to play out to open up the other doors. So, for me to just sit back and wait and see what happens and just control what I can on the field. And, if I get a call from an affiliated team, or if I get a call from another Mexican League team or winter ball, then, we'll go from there. But to have all these options running through my head when it's not the time to make a decision, it's been tough, but it's something that we got to do. And that's the baseball lifestyle in general. You never know what tomorrow holds. Good day, bad day, release, big leagues, whatever. There's so many different variables that can control, and you have to just control what you can and do well on the field.
You said Laguna owns your rights for next season. If a affiliated team called, how does that work? I'm playing hypothetical because I'm just curious on the process, and maybe you don't know the answer to this. But if the Royals called and said we want to bring Ethan back and bring him into AAA or something like that, how does that work? Do they have to negotiate with the Laguna team in Mexico? How does that work?
Yeah, usually there's a contract buyout
Okay.
that the affiliated team would have to do, but with the possibility of me getting signed, I had in my contract that I could just go for free. because I didn't want anything holding a team back from signing me, like a buyout clause or anything. So I made sure that there's a $0 buyout clause in my contract that and if an affiliated team wanted me, that I could just go. Because, Laguna is full of good people that want what's best for us and want our dreams to come true also. So if I want to go play in the States or, an affiliate, they want what's best for me. And, they were happy to give me that addition in my contract.
Do you still want to play in the majors? Is that still your dream?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that dream will ever go away. We've had so many ups and downs in this game, and being released twice, most people would call it a career, but it's always the dream. But at a certain point, it becomes about what's best for my family and all that too. So being able to make money and provide is also a top priority. But obviously, the dream will always be there, and most guys will say the same, that baseball can crush you, but for some reason we still end up loving it. And, it's a dream to play professionally.
Well, there's a story we just covered on Sports Spectrum of this pitcher from the Texas Rangers, Austin Bibbins Dirks, who's 32 years old, 12 years in the minors, 20 different teams, and he finally gets that first call to the majors in May of 2017. That's got to give you some hope, huh?
Yeah, absolutely, because especially in today's media, all you hear about is guys that are like Mike Trout or Bryce Harper who get to the big leagues at 20 years old, and it makes it seem like it's impossible to get there once you start getting beyond those ages. And for me being 27, a lot of people think that it's, past my opportunity. But, once you put up numbers, numbers don't lie, and, it's always possible. I don't care if I make it when I'm 27 or 37 or whatever it is. Like, I don't know what the future holds, but no one can take that away from you once you make it to the big leagues, even if it's just for one day. Guys that spend one day in the big leagues can always say that they made it.
Absolutely. Now we have one more question to go, and I know you're a listener, and I know we have a lot of our listeners on the podcast know what this question is, but we ask this to all of our guests. So for you, Ethan Chapman, 27 years old, you're in Mexico right now as we speak, playing minor league baseball in the Mexican League. What has God been teaching you right now?
The biggest thing, like we've covered before, is probably patience and trust, and knowing that He is going to do what's best for me, and His will is the best for me, and not to force my will thinking that it's God's. I've been really practicing on hearing Him and listening, and making sure that His will is also connected with mine. That my will is His, and it's a struggle to do that. It's very humbling, and I think it's what's best for us, though. It relieves me of anxiety and stress, and all that stuff doesn't help me play better or be a better husband. So being able to kind of let go and let the pieces fall where they will, and just be able to work with those is the biggest challenge. And I feel like I've learned a lot throughout this season, and especially throughout my career, to be able to let go and trust God with what's next.
He is Ethan Chapman, outfielder with the Vaqueros Union Laguna Mexican Baseball League team. And that is, by the way, we haven't talked about this, but the Vaqueros Union Laguna is kind of the equivalent to AAA baseball here in the States. So, Ethan, listen, it's been great to hear your story. It's been very encouraging. Obviously, it's not easy, but I think a lot of people have gotten a better idea of what the grind is like being a minor league baseball player. And from all of us here at Sports Spectrum, we appreciate your contribution to the website as a diary of a minor league baseball player this year. And that journal will keep going, and we'll keep hearing updates from you. But listen, I just want to say thank you. And thanks for joining us here on the podcast.
No, thank you for having me. And, thanks for the personal relationship that we've had and grown also. It's been very helpful in my journey and my walk, and everything that you guys have on Sports Spectrum has really made a big impact in my life as well as many others.
He is Ethan Chapman of the Vaqueros Union Laguna Mexican minor league baseball player, and we do appreciate Ethan being a part of the Sports Spectrum podcast. And we also appreciate his contributions every single week at sportspectrum.com and kind of giving us a glimpse of what life is like in his diary of a minor league baseball player journal entry. So check that out, sportspectrum.com. I think you guys will really like what Ethan has to say, and just hearing his heart for people, his heart for baseball, and his heart for the Lord is just really encouraging. Thank you so much for being a part of the program today. You can follow us on Twitter at sports_spectrum, or you can follow me and reach out at Jason Romano. And we'd love to hear from you. We just want to hear what you think of the podcast. We love your encouragement, and we love your feedback too, constructive feedback on how we can get better in what we're doing here. As always too, you can subscribe and become a member of the Sports Spectrum family at sportspectrum.com. It's just $36 for 1 year. That's $3 a month, basically, really cheap, but we give you a magazine and we give you all access to the content that we put out on sportspectrum.com, and every single magazine that's ever been published since the year 1987 is on there. So check it out. All of our old content as well. So we give you access to all the archives. $36 a year at sportspectrum.com to become a partner with us. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast, and we will see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum.